high level, we will go through these three types of flows. I think now Salesforce has a lot, but I would say these are the most used ones. Then we will build one flow, very basic, step by step. We can do it all together, which is why I'm asking you in the chat to get your orgs ready. And then we will talk about a little bit how to debug your flows. And then we can see one more flow where we're going to create different types of records all from one single screen that the user, or two screens the user will get. So this is going to be a screen flow to create opportunities and then additional records related to an account. All right. So what is Flow Builder? I'm pretty sure you all have seen all the hype about flows. I think it is the most powerful tool that Salesforce has for admins. It doesn't require to know any code. And it's almost like if you know how to build a process flow, then you kind of get the idea of how to build a flow. It helps you replace repetitive manual tasks. Let's do automation so that users do not have to do the same thing over and over and over. It enforces business processes. You can also send emails or notifications or tasks. It can be triggered by data changes. It can be triggered automatically, like on a regular basis. You can create records from other records. You can update records that the user is updating or creating. You can query data. So you have, and with every release, Salesforce keeps adding additional features. And I think they will continue to do that. So it's a very good thing to learn how flows work. We all know, if you didn't, now you do. Flows replace the workflow rules and process builders. You cannot create any more of those. And I think they are retiring entirely the thing soon. So support is no longer available, I think. So we have to be mindful of migrating every automation that an org has in workflow rules and process builders to a flow. And then you can consolidate and even improve your automations. I think these are the three flow types that we really need to know. And we will see now when we start building their flow, we have a lot of options now. I don't know all of them, but these three, I would say, are the most used ones, are the ones that I know the most. So record trigger flows, this is when a record is created, updated, or deleted, then something happens. You automate actions while, like before or after. In that sense, they kind of work like code, um, but they are not really code. Like there's code behind the scenes, let's say. But yeah, so you can automate actions when you're updating, creating, or deleting records. So the user doesn't really need to do anything else. And once they take that action, something else will happen. Schedule flows, they run on a set schedule. So you can say, we're going to schedule this flow to run every month or every day. I'm not entirely sure about all the options. I don't use these very often, but um, there are workarounds if you need to schedule a flow to run on a basis that is not out of the box presented. And let's say you need to, like one example would be uh, the sales rep needs to get an email with all the birth dates of clients that are happening next month, like, or at the beginning of the month. Then you can do that. You can schedule a flow and query all the contacts that have a birthday next month and send that to the user in an email. And then we have screen flows. Screen flows are launched by a user. So you have a button somewhere or a screen available in a record page or the home page, or we'll see I added my flow to the utility bar. And then the user clicks the button, starts the process. You set screens that I guess that's why they call it screen flow. So you can create screens where you add text and you add features like buttons and lookups and um, pick lists and so on and so forth, so that a user can enter data, and then you can do like it's several steps. You can add as many screens as you want, and then you have input forms. The user ends the process, and then of course automation happens. The records are created. You can update records and so on and so forth. All right, so let's build our flow. Hopefully everybody has their orgs ready. So we're gonna build a very basic flow. When a contact is created, we're gonna create a follow-up task for the owner. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to setup, flows, create new flow, then record trigger flow. We're gonna select contact as our object when the record is created, and we'll see we have a lot of options, so we can talk through them. And then we're going to add an action to create records. We're going to create a task, and we can set some fields. Salesforce now has this thing that is called the automation. I don't know if you've seen it, the automation app. So you can start from there as well. And you can see all the flows that have been recently viewed, and then you have like a flows tab list and so on and so forth. So we can start from here, or you can actually navigate to setup, and then you search for flows in the quick search, and then you will see all the flows. The other view is prettier, I guess, but we can start from here. So let me just real quick, let's click new flow. All right, so like I was saying, Salesforce now has a bunch of options. You have some categories. So triggered automations, these would be records that get like the automation gets launched from other automations or from other actions. Scheduled automations. So this is what we were talking about. I want to get an email every month with all the birth dates for the coming month. Um, Screen automations. So these are the ones where the user has to interact with the form that you're creating, and auto launched. So usually we have processes where, or these would be, let's say, um, we already have another flow that is something to create, I don't know, a contact. But then within that flow, we can call another flow, and that other flow would do some other actions or automations. It can be called also by code. So we can um, invoke a flow from Apex. There are so many options. And then you have the most frequently used. Of course, we already mentioned these three. So screen flows, record trigger flows, and schedule trigger flows. So let's click on record trigger flow. And I personally like a lot this auto layout because it will like organize the flow for you. But if you want to actually drag and drop and things like that, you can use the free form. I really like the auto layout. So we're gonna start configuring our flow, and we said we're gonna create a task once a contact is created, right? So let's search for contact as our object, because what's the record that will trigger this automation? It's going to be creating a contact. And like I said, it's only on creation. So we don't want to create a task every time a contact is updated. If we really needed to do that, we can use a record is created or updated, or if we just want to get automations to happen when a record is updated, we could use the when it's updated. So you have all the DML options here. So let's do a record is created so we can get a task only when we are creating a record. You can also set conditions. We're not going to do any of these now, but let's say we wanted to create a task every time, I don't know, the email of the contact is changed. Then we could set criteria here of saying, well, what I want this to happen every time a record is updated, but only when the email field is updated. So that's where the entry conditions would would be used. For now, we don't really care. So let's say none. And then Salesforce gives you options to optimize the flow for fast field updates. So these are updates that would happen before the record is actually saved in the database. So these would mean I want to update another field in the same contact. So let's say I am going to create a contact and the I want to set the status, or I don't know, the rating of the contact to be set to a certain value before the record is saved, not after. So that would be like a fast field update. We are going to use actions and related records. This happens after the record is created because we're actually creating a task every time a contact is created, and we actually need the contact ID to associate the task to the contact, right? So we're going to have to do the action after the record is saved. So this is going to run immediately. We could add schedule paths. So we could say, well, every, I don't know, whenever we're going to run this other process or something. Let's click on the plus sign. And then we have to add an element. So elements are like the different things or components you can add to the flow to do stuff, right? So you can query records, you can create records, you can um, like send email alerts, you can um, have some logic, like you can do loops. If you query all the contacts that have a birthday next month, then you have a list. And then you might want to do something about it. You might want to add a task to each contact. So you would need to loop through each record to actually do something. So we're going to see an example in our next flow. For now, we are going to search for the create records component or element, and it will open on the side the details of the component so you can populate and configure your elements. So we're going to say create new task for each new contact. The API name, as always, is auto-populated. It's a good idea always to add descriptions. I'm going to skip it for now. But it's always a good idea to say what are you doing in this particular step. Then how to set the record field values. I'm going to set them manually because I don't have any variables. The record doesn't exist, so I cannot reuse anything. So I want to set them manually. And what kind of object we are creating? We are actually creating a task. So we search for task. And then we need to set the values of the task. So we know the subject is required for sure, right? So we're gonna say we want, and as you can see, Salesforce will give you the fields that are on the record um, or that are related, like in the object, right? So you can select, and then what value are we populating? These big lists are you know how you, when you create a task and you click on the subject, it'll provide you some options. You can select one of these, or you can just type, I don't know, call contact or send gift, welcome gift. I'm awful with examples, so. Okay, now we need to set, for example, the due date, right? I don't know why this is called due date only. I guess because it doesn't have a time. How are we going to set this due date? We could create a variable to add days, to like a formula to add days to the day that contact is created, or you can select when the process is running. So for example, running flow interview, this means like data of when the automation is happening. So we can select the current date, and that would populate the due date of the task with the date when the automation was running. Or we could create a variable. For example, we can create a new resource and we can talk about resources. This is like things that you can actually use within your flow, that you have variables, you have um, like different types, right? So variable is you're going to store a value that can be used throughout the flow. You have constants. So this would mean I want I don't know, the subject, for example. The subject will always be the same. So this is not going to change. You set the subject and then you can use this resource like in field merge kind of things. You can create formula. So this is what we would be using, for example, to set today's date plus, I don't know, like 7 days. So they have 7 days to send the gift, or the task is going to be due in 7 days. You have text templates. I like to use these when you have to insert resource like fields or the content of a field within a text. So the subject could be, for example, send welcome gift to, and then we would insert like the contact name, for example. And then it can be reused, and it's not going to be always the same for all the contacts, right? Stage. I'm not entirely sure. I've never used these before, so if anybody knows, um, please share. Let's create a formula. And so this is the API name. It cannot have spaces or anything. So we're gonna name it something like task due date. I like to use camel case. So that's the first letter of each word is like a capital letter. And that way you can easily read what this means instead of like a huge line of text that you don't know what that means. Then we're gonna say um, add, I don't know, like 10 days to current date to set task to date or something. I don't know. Then what type of data we're gonna have? This is going to be a date, of course. And then we're gonna do today. If you don't know the functions, you can always search. You know how Salesforce is very good at this. So I'm gonna search for today plus 10. You can check if your formula is valid, and then we're done. So now the due date is going to be populated with our task due date. If you want to see all the resources you have created, you can click on this little icon and you can see the different elements and resources that you have in your flow. And if you click on them, you can edit. If you click on this little arrow, it'll tell you where you're using them. So if I want to delete the resource because I think I don't really need it, but I can't, you can come here and then you will see, oh, this is being used in this create new task element. And then you can go in and change it or something. This is very helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot something that is not properly working or is not being set correctly. Okay, what else do we need? Of course, we need the assign to. So the assign to is going to be, we said we're going to create a task for the contact owner. So quick resources is always a good thing to keep in mind. The triggering contact is the contact that you're creating that is triggering this automation. So we're going to click on this little arrow and we're going to search for the owner, and we can set the ID. So we scroll down to the record fields and we should be able to find, I think it's easier if you just type and search. But ID, there's so many IDs. The user ID. Perfect. And then we're gonna set, of course, the name ID. This is the who ID. If you know, tasks have two fields that you can where you can relate records, right? One is the related to, so that's the what ID, and you can associate any kind of record except for leads and contacts. And then you have the name, and that's where you can associate contacts and leads. We're gonna use the same contact that we are creating to relate the task, right? So you click on the contact and then you type ID because I am typing like here below. And then we don't want any relationship field. We actually want the contact ID. So we can click there. And then we can also set the status of the task. I think it's going to be defaulted, but so you get the idea. You select fields and then you select the value that you want. So we can put it as not started or we can set it to in progress. So now we are ready to test our flow. So we're going to save and we can name this create like gift task when a contact is created. And like I said, I think it's always a good idea to add some description of what this flow is for. We're going to skip it for now. So now our flow is saved and we can debug or we can run the flow. Um, a good thing about debugging is it'll show you step by step what it did. So let's select one contact. If you click here and you don't see any, um, I'm sure if you search for John, there will be one John in your org. Okay, so we're going to run it. And that's it. So you can see all the details here, how it started. So this flow was triggered as if the contact record was created. So we're saying um, this user created this contact at this time. And then the trigger and record met the start conditions. We didn't add any. That's why it says null. If we had that option of, I want to update this only when the email field is changed, it would say the email field was actually changed. So that is true. And that's why it met the conditions. Then it went to our second element, create records. So we're going to create a new task. One or more tasks records are ready to be created because it prepares the data and has it ready for whenever it's time to commit. So actually saving the data to the database. And this is how the records were going to be created. It set the activity date to with our, remember that we created this resource, and then it added 10 days to today's date, so May 5th. The owner was the record owner ID, and that was my user. The status was set to in progress. The subject is send welcome gift, and the who ID was the record ID. So the record that triggered the automation, I populated it with the contact ID. So a record is ready to be created. It gives you the ID. And then, of course, since this is a debug, um, there are no changes that actually happened because they were rolled back. I've never used this convert to test, but I always think it's a good idea to ensure that you're testing regularly whatever automation you're doing. So I think this is a way of Salesforce. In when you're doing code in Apex, you always have to create test classes, and they need to cover at least 75%, I think, of the code. So these would be kind of like the same situation where you're testing your flows. So you're kind of like doing that test classes, but from a flow perspective. So now we can activate our fantastic flow, and we can go back to our org. And let me go back to my regular app. You can go to sales or service or whatever uh, you have. And then let's create a new contact. I have record types for some reason. So let's call these. Oh, did you all know what's the last name of Astra? Do you know who Astra is? Astra is Salesforce mascot. I don't know if you can see on my little thing. So this is Astra, of course. I have plenty of them. His last name is Nomical. Let's set an account. We don't care about anything else. We're just trying to see
The last name means something?
because it's
I didn't know that.
astronomical.
Oh, nice.
I think that's the one. So you can search for that and then tell me if I'm lying. I might be. So we're going to save, and our contact was created, and our task is right there. And it has our subject, our due date of today's plus 7, like 10 days, and the status is in progress. And it was related to our contact. All right. So always test in a sandbox if you're actually doing this like for work or something, like in a developer edition or a hands-on org, doesn't really matter. But it's always a good idea to do this in a sandbox first, and then you test and you do some different scenarios, like what happens if I don't know, add like a required field on the contact, or um, I don't know. What happens if you're assigning the task to the user, like a particular user, let's say the owner of the account where you're creating the contact, and then that user is inactive? Then you have to make sure that you have a lot of scenarios covered. So we did a little bit of debugging, right? So the debug button, like I said, I think it's very useful. You get to see how the flow is running and what kind of things it's testing and what kind of values is getting. And I'll show you like an example of one flow that I was having an issue with, that in our more advanced flow. And I didn't really know what was happening until I realized I was saving the wrong field, and then it worked. We talked about testing in a sandbox first. Make sure that you don't do this in production directly, right? Flow error emails. Those are really good. At work, I know we get a lot of them, but that gives you an idea of what is happening and why your flow might be failing. So let me just show you real quick. So this is one of those errors, right? So you get a flow error email, something happened with your flow, and it'll tell you, oh, there's a malformed ID. And you're like, I have no clue what that means. But um, it'll give you all the errors, like all the details. This is your flow name, this is your org, um, and how it started, and then what happened, and you have all the details. This is just like that debug screen, but in an email. And then it will get to a point where it will say, where when I was trying to create a record, it failed because of something. So those emails are very useful as well, because something might have changed in your org and you didn't realize it. Maybe somebody deleted a field or removed the pick list value, and you didn't, like, you don't know, because a lot of people work in the same org all the time. Like, it's rare to be the only admin, and the only one that makes changes. And then the flow might start failing because nobody considered, oh, this pick list value is actually used in a flow to create records or something. So it's always good to keep an eye on those emails. And then the debug logs. Like, if you're not really sure why an email, like a flow, is failing, putting a user in a debug log mode, it's always a good idea. Or like, if you can run the flow, usually if you open the dev console, it'll start logging all the things that you're doing. Okay, so let's do our more advanced flow. I thought it would be way more late than it is, so we're going to have plenty of time to go through this. Um, our goal for this flow is going to be to create an opportunity for an account, and then we want to automatically create a case so that somebody, I don't know, I'm terrible with examples, so let's pretend that this is a good example. We're going to create an opportunity, and then we want to create a follow-up case so that somebody reaches out to the client for something, and then we're going to create a task for each of the contacts. It says team member, which is wrong. I'll fix this before sharing the presentation. We're going to create a task for each contact in that account so that, I don't know, let's pretend that we want to send a gift or send a welcome letter or something, or update a record. um, so it'll all happen in the same flow, and we're going to do screen flows. So our step one is, let's create a screen where we're going to get all the details for the new opportunity from the user. So the user will get to set the opportunity name, will get to set the amount and the close date, and then it's going to select the account for which this opportunity will be created. Then step two, we're going to get all the contacts from that account and we're going to sort them so that we can auto-populate in a way the contact that will be associated to the case. In our second screen, the user will select the contact. And I thought it was a good idea to show. So we're going to kind of like pre-select the contact. We're going to check if the contact is in the finance department because this is a sales opportunity. So we're going to search for a contact where the department is finance. If there's no one, then we can select the first one alphabetically. So we're going to do some sort of smart defaults. It's not really super smart, but we're going to sort of like pre-select for the user, and then the user gets to decide. Then we're going to create the record. So we're going to actually create the opportunity and then the case, and then we're going to add a first comment to the case. Everything will be linked. And then we're going to create tasks for each of the contacts in the account. Okay, so step one is the screen, right? So we're going to go back to the org. I already have this built because otherwise it would take me forever, of course. But I'm gonna search for my new sales opportunity flow. This is a screen flow. So if you want to start creating it, go back to your flows screen, click new, and then select screen flow. So this is how it starts. It starts with the screen flow. And the first thing we do is we add, if you click here and you add an interaction um, element, this is the screen that you can add. So I already have it here. And then you can add. So the screen is going to be blank. So let me just really quick show you. If you click here, this is our screen. It's going to be totally blank. It won't have anything. I'm going to cancel. But you can start adding components or elements here, right? So you can add fields. Um, if you have a record selected, let's say that if we put this flow in the account page, it might bring the actual ID, like the whole account record, and then you would be able to select fields. Since we're asking the user to search for an account, we have components to add. So you can search for text here, and then you have input components or display components. Display would be like I drag this here, and this is a display component to display text. And then you get a side panel to actually configure. So I named my first display text component as welcome user. So I added welcome and then the first name, and that is a resource. So you can search for resources here. And again, this works like the resources we were searching when populating fields for the task. So these would be um, like the user who's triggering or who's like the running user. I don't know how. I think in the global variables, you can search for running user, and then you can again search for the ID or for the name, or I added the first name, so you can add whatever you need, right? And then you can just type whatever text, and you can change the size and the colors and so on and so forth. You could also set visibility, like this is always displayed, but I could say show this only if the account name is blank or something. We don't really care because we want to welcome everybody. So next I added a lookup component. So if you search here for lookup, you have choice lookup or you have just lookup. A lookup is just like a regular lookup field where the user will click and then will start typing to search for an existing record. I named this search account. And then this is a piece that confuses me always. So I always have to go back to the documentation and see how it's done because I always forget. But you want the API name of the field that you're doing the lookup for. So that means since we are creating an opportunity, our object is opportunity, right? And you can just type opportunity. You don't need to search or anything. And then what are we searching? We're searching accounts to relate them to the opportunity. So what's the account API name lookup? So lookup API name. So if you go to your object manager and you search for opportunity, because that's the object where we want to create a new record in, and then you go to the fields and relationships. So this is what we are trying to use, right? So this is already a lookup to account, and the API name is account ID. So that's what we are using here. And then you add the label, and this is going to be enabled, of course. So this label is false. And I just left everything else blank. You can populate these with something, like I was saying, if you're starting this flow from an account record, you could pre-populate these from that page. You can make this required, so we can say true, and that will make this, you see the red thingy starts, appears there. So that's our lookup. Um, you can validate the input, so I'll show you an example of that. And then I added a section because I wanted to see, like, now you're going to add the opportunity details. So I added a section. So if you drag this, it's going to be empty as well. And then you can include the header. If I uncheck this, you don't see it, but I think it's nice to see now you're going to add like data for a different thing. And then you can drag components inside this section. So I added a text input component. This is going to be the opportunity name. This is required. And I pre-populated this with something. So if I open this resource, which I cannot from here, so let me go here to, so I created, you can click new resource, and then you're going to get the window to select the type. So I selected text template, and then I added the API name again, no spaces, camel case. And what I did was I pre-populated with sales opportunity 4, and then I added the record name of the lookup that I had before. So remember that in your sales, in your first screen, we added a lookup to account. So I would see from that screen the components that I have. And then I have the record ID or the record name. So I selected the record name. And then I added the date so that I can easily, if I run this opportunity flow for the same account over and over again, I can see like one day and then the next, I could see which opportunity was created when. Again, I selected this as plain text, otherwise it would add like weird things. Um, so when the opportunity gets created, let me just show you one that was already created. It's going to pre-populate the opportunity name like this, like sales opportunity 4, and then the account name, and then the date, which I think it's nice, but not really needed. Okay, then of course we need a close date. So I did the same thing. The default, this one doesn't have a default value, so we could do the same thing as in the task, create a formula to add, I don't know, maybe a month from today's date. I didn't do anything, but I did validate the input. So Salesforce by default would not let you set the close date in the past. And then you get that weird error that says something like, hey, McFly, you cannot travel to the past or something. Have you seen it? I wish I had. I think I have an example of that. Well, if I don't, I'll add it. It's really funny. So I included a validation in the same screen flow. So I said the date needs to be in the future for a close date. And then I just selected close date has to be greater than today. If this is false, it's going to throw the error. And for that, you can select again This is the close date is what I added as a name. This is the API name of the same component. So I'm just saying this component's content needs to be greater than today. And the amount, of course, and then I'm done. The other thing that I usually do not use is the pause button in Flow. So when you're doing a screen flow, in the footer, you always have three buttons. Well, you can show or hide, but if you hide it, then they don't have a way to finish. And you can, by default, the footer will have next or finish, depending on what step in the flow you are in, the previous button to go back, and then there's a pause button that I think it might be useful if you have a flow with a lot of screens and a lot of steps. I usually hide it. And then you can use custom labels or the standard previous, next, or finish. Or you could say something like, I don't know, uh, back, for example. And then that's what you would see instead of the standard. Of course, next with back doesn't make any sense. But all right, so that's my first screen. And then I wanted to get all the contacts for the account. Remember, our next step was we're going to pre-populate. So that's our first screen, right? We set the opportunity name, the amount, the close date, the stage, which I really didn't. But we can do that. You could select the stage um, in that same screen. You could add it. I'm going to pre-populate it or automatically set it. And then we have the account lookup. So they can search for an existing account. Um, so no code, no really nothing HTML. It's all drag and drop. You do need to understand a few things. Google is your best friend. If there's something that you don't really know how it works, there's always somebody that went through the same thing. And Salesforce documentation, when it comes to flows, I think it's very detailed and good. There are other pieces that are not very good, but I think for flows, it's pretty good. Um, okay, so why are we using a lookup for the account? Because we can get the ID and the entire record, really. And then we can use it for other things. Like we want to create a case for this account. So we need the ID. We need to relate the opportunity to the account. So we need the ID. Um, so in our next step, we get the records. I think I might need to go faster unless you guys can stay for a bit longer. But we're going to query all the contacts for the selected account. And we're going to sort them like from the beginning because then it will be easier. Remember, we wanted to make sure that we pre-select a contact for the user. So we said if the contact is in the finance department, we will pre-select that, like the first contact with finance in the department field. If not, we're going to pre-select the first one alphabetically, and then the user can actually do whatever they want. Um, okay, so we're going to use all the contacts in a future screen and in a different step. So it's useful to get all of them and not just the first one. So what does that really mean? So there might be an easier way to do this. Like there's no process of, oh, if you want to do this, you always have to do it this way. Like I feel that flows will allow you to do things in different ways. There's always there's always room to optimize, but there's never like a single path to get something automated. You can always use different like routes or so what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a single list of all the contacts and then just take one of it to set it as the first contact alphabetically and then search for one that was in the finance department and I would override. And I couldn't really find a way to do that. Salesforce now introduced not very long ago this collection filter, and this will allow you kind of like create a subset of a collection. A collection is I'm going to get all the contacts from the account. So that is a collection of contacts, right? And then I could filter. even more and create a different like sub collection, if you will. But I didn't really find this easy. Like it didn't really work for me. So what I did was I got the first contact first. Um, so you do a get records, and this is like doing a query on the contact object, and then how like which contacts do I want? I want those contacts where the account ID is the same as the account that I already searched or that the user searched in our screen, right? So this is the new sales opportunity screen, which is this one. And then you will see the account there. And then I got the ID because we need to compare apples with apples, right? So I want those contacts where the account ID is the same as the one in our first screen. And then I sorted ascending by last name, and I am just saving the first record from that query. This would be like, as in SOQL, this would be like limit one. And then I have a variable to save that record because we might need to change it later on in the process, but I want to have it there in case I don't find anything better, right? So this is a variable that I created, and this is a record variable. So what does that mean? If I go here and I click on new resource, that would be the variable resource. And what this does is it's something that you can change, you can use throughout the flow, but also the value can change. And then this variable can have different types. If you want to store an entire record, you would select a record. And then you can select the object. So in our case, this one would be a contact variable. And then you can also create a collection. So that would mean you save, like if I wanted to save all the contacts, for example, I would allow multiple values. So this creates a collection of records of that object. In this case, this is just one contact because I just want one contact to associate it to the case. So I'm going to save just the first one. But then I really needed everything because then in a future step, I'm going to create tasks. So I needed to actually save all the contacts from the record. So this is again a get records. It's going to be sorted by last name, but in this case, I'm going to store all the records that I can find. And this becomes in itself a collection, right? So now I'm going to loop through them, and I'm just going to show you real quick the flow, and I might not be able to go into detail of every step. I'll send you screenshots if you want to. Um, but once I have all the records, I'm going to loop through them. And if I make this a little smaller, you might be able to see the whole path, right? So for each contact, it's going to evaluate all these things. And then once it's done, it's going to go back and go to the next and go to the next until all the records have been reviewed or it somehow ended the flow. So what we're doing is I have a decision at the beginning saying, did I find a finance contact? And this is just, I have a variable to say, this is a Boolean, again, a resource variable type Boolean to save a true or false value. So as soon as I find one, I'm gonna set this to true, and then I can like get out of the loop, even if not all the contacts were evaluated. And then I'm gonna evaluate, oh, for this particular contact that I'm going through right now, from the list, I'm reviewing one. In this particular contact, is this the contact in the department finance? And then I'm gonna say the the contact that I'm currently evaluating, the value that it has in the department field is finance. If yes, then I'm going to save it. And like I said, the variables can change throughout the flow. So now I'm going to replace whatever value I already had with this contact that I'm evaluating now. If no, then I'm just going to skip it and go to the next. If I find it, I am also setting this variable to true. And then now that I have a finance contact, this one will say, oh, yes, you now have a finance contact. So I'm going to exit the loop. Does that make sense? Well, let's say that I have now my first contact, right? So I'm going to go to my next screen, which is not this one. And then this is where I would be selecting the contact. So we're pre-populating the contact for the user with that selected contact that we have, but we're also sharing, like this is a radio buttons component, but the choices, so you can either add choices on your own, like manually, if you wanted them to select like from a list something to save in a text field, but I actually wanted all the contacts to be displayed. So I have a variable where I have all the contacts that we queried before, and then they get displayed here, and then the user can select one. So we're giving them the choice, like the power to select the right contact for the case. Then, of course, our selected contact needs to change because maybe the user selected something different from what we had pre-selected. And then we go into creating opportunities. So again, we set the fields for our opportunity, and we already had some information from the first screen, but now we have the account ID as well. And now that the opportunity is created, we can create our case. We're going to populate the account, the contact, and the contact is going to be whatever the user finally selected. And then we can create a comment. So we need the case to be created first so we can actually have the ID to associate the comment to the case. And then finally, we're going to loop again through our list of contacts and we're going to create a task. So one thing here is we need to bulkify, because if I were to create a case like the task within the loop, we might reach limits very easy. Imagine that you have an account with, I don't know, 100 contacts or I don't know how many. Then you might reach like VML limits or SQL query limits, or and Salesforce is very tight in that because it's a like a tenant kind of system, right? So we're sharing resources with other companies. So we need to bulkify. What that means is we're gonna kind of like prepare all the data first, and then we create everything at once. In previous cases, we're only creating one record, right? One opportunity, one case, one comment. But here we're going to create multiple tasks. So we need to save the task details first, and then we add that individual task that we prepared to a collection. And then we do it again for the next contact and the next contact. And once we're done, we can actually do the insert of all the tasks all at once. Then we present our final screen where we say, oh, it was a huge success. Thank you. You created an opportunity, a case, and tasks. And that's it. So now we can debug. I don't know if I made any changes. Of course I did. And I cannot remember. Oh, because this is active, of course. I'm going to save as a new version. I could have deactivated, but whatever. Okay, so now we can debug. And we're going to run this. So this is our first screen. I'm going to search for whatever account. Oh, this one already I haven't. So I'm going to search for this. And you see it pre-populated the opportunity name. User could change it. If I select the date in the past, it's going to tell me the validation that we had. So I'm going to select something in the future. I'm going to put 52 as amount. And then it went to the next screen. You see that this one is sort of pre-selected. Not really, I don't know why. But we have all our contacts in our account. I can select one of them and I'm going to click next. Oh, and it failed, right? So this is very important where I'm debugging. I didn't activate it immediately. And I know, well, it showed me all the details and now I need to do something to fix it.
Barb,
Hmm.
I feel pretty easy to work with that. If you get the workflows and the values correctly set up, it's pretty easy to work to with these workflows.
Yeah, I guess for me the challenge is to really understand how each component works. So documentation is always very helpful in that sense.
And how the information goes through the workflow.
Yes. So that's why this I got my error email now. So let's go through the debug again. Um, let's select a different one. I'm gonna select this contact. And then yeah, so these will tell you what happened. So you have your first screen and you have the get records. So I only saved the first one, and then it went through all the contacts to see if we have a finance department contact. Um, we it couldn't find any, so we didn't have any. And then it went again through all the contacts. So you see the loop is going through all these three IDs. And then the error is happening when I want to create the case. Why? Because I want to put an ID. The case has a field contact ID, and I want to populate it with a name. Like that's never going to work, right? So we need to identify where are we populating the selected contact. The last place where we're doing that is on the screen, right? In the screen, we're displaying all the contacts for the user to select it. And then we are assigning, instead of saving the contact ID in this last assignment, we're saving the name. So that's where our issue is. So if I click edit, I can go back here, our last assignment, and here, instead of saving the contact, our, our previous screen is this one where the user selects. So here, I'm gonna do, oh, I cannot select anything else because then here is where I am saving the wrong data. So when the user selects these, in these contacts in account is where I am putting all the choices and what the user is saving. So I'm gonna go back to my resource in the selected contact. Now it was contacts in account. So this is our choice collection. And then we're gonna edit and we're gonna say, in this choice, we're saying, oh, show all the contacts from the account, right? The choice label is the contact name, but we actually need to save the ID, right? The contact ID. So now that we have the ID, we can debug again, and we'll be done in just 2 more minutes. So again, I'm gonna select a different account. We have all our contacts selected. So this is where the user selects the contact, and it worked. So I think it's very important to really first understand the flow that you want to create from a business point of view. Like, what are you trying to do? And then you can map the process. And then as you start building, you're going to realize, well, maybe I need a decision first, or, oh, I actually need to have the record created first so that I can use it in a later step. And then the debug will always help you a lot. Um, so now we can activate our flow. And I added this flow, like I said, to here, to the utility bar, but it could be added like in the home screen or in an account record page, but I added here in the utility bar. So I'm going to click there and it starts here. So I'm going to search for
Oh, you added to the deliver. I never done that.
um here and in the app manager. So I have my pink management app, of course, pink. And then here you can add utility items. It only works in desktop, but if you click add, you have a lot of options that I didn't know were available, but one of them is flow.
That's cool. Nice. Nice to know. Thank you.
And then you can set the panel width and height, and you can select the proper icon, I guess. So yeah, and then it's always there
That's
because
pretty cool.
since I was adding a lookup to account, it didn't really make sense to put it in the account page. It feels like, well, I need to create an opportunity right now,
Yeah,
urgently,
yeah, I love it.
and
I
then
love
you
it.
have it there. Yeah, it's really nice. So now you have an opportunity from here, and again, you can select this. I'm just gonna select a different account because I think I already created one for that record. So we're gonna add a task for Astro, and it gives you the case number and everything. So I'm gonna finish this. I will close this. And now if I go to the record, we have all the tasks associated that we created. Of course, I ran the flow multiple times. But then we also have our opportunity, and then we also have our case. And the case has the contact that was selected and the account, and it has the first comment, which of course I selected rich text instead of plain text. But if you do plain text, it wouldn't show all these HTML tags. And that's it. So I went over, so I'm sorry. I'll send this presentation with all the steps, sort of, and then you can build this on your own and share your screenshots if you want. I highly recommend the build flows with Flow Builder Trail. It has a lot of modules to work on flows. Of course, if you search Flow Builder in the help docs, like I said, I think they're really good for flows. And our next session will be May 16th, I believe. And we'll do getting the most out of Salesforce daily. This is an in-person session in Starbucks in Montevideo Shopping. So I'll see you there.